Hi, everyone, and welcome to MassBio's monthly town hall. We're here today, almost exactly 1 year into the COVID-19 pandemic in Massachusetts, to discuss the life science industry's continued response. More than 95 companies with a presence in Massachusetts have worked to address COVID through diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine development. And many of these companies are the small and emerging biotechs that make up the backbone of this cluster. But with a slow vaccine rollout and new variants on the rise, the life sciences ecosystem, from digital health to medtech and biotech, needs to work together to keep driving cutting-edge research and developing groundbreaking solutions that will keep individuals healthy and out of the hospital in the near term while preparing for the next global health crisis. We've lined up an incredible panel of experts to reflect on the industry's response, the lessons we've learned, and what we can do to prepare for the future. Please join me in welcoming Steve Boyd, CEO of Boyd Technologies, and Francie Plendel, Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs and Policy at AstraZeneca. And I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Brian Johnson, President of MassMEDIC, who can speak to the medtech community's response to COVID-19. Brian, thanks so much for co-hosting today's event with me.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you to all of our friends in the audience and our members in the audience. And just a quick note that, I think you'll hear a lot about collaboration. I think collaboration of our industries has been key, but for us at MassMEDIC, the collaboration with MassBio has been incredible. I'm so proud of the initiatives we've worked on, from the life science supply chain hub to working together to make sure that vaccine rollout is timely. Like your members, mass medical device companies were thrust into action over the past year, responding to this unprecedented crisis. Companies located in New England tripled their output of things like ventilators, blood gas analyzers, convalescent plasma machines, and of course, emergency medical equipment, which sadly was needed with so much demand. And of course, one other piece of equipment that we have heard a lot about, PPE. I think we saw a mass mobilization of companies working to produce personal protective equipment, both companies in the medtech sector, companies who had nothing to do with creating masks or face shields or surgical gowns, pivoted their lines to create new PPE. And of course, several mask-based companies pivoted to change their supply from other things like textiles and things like that to create much needed emergency medical supply. And one of those companies that I'm really proud to have worked with over the past year is Boyd Technologies. Steve, let's start with you. Take us back to March of 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic was beginning to rage in Massachusetts. Give us a peek as to how you guys responded at Boyd, and tell us about some of the ways in which you jumped into this fray.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian. And Kendall, it's great to be here. Our first concern was really for our stakeholders, our employees and our customers and their safety, and then the supply of critical products that go into non-elective surgery and chronic disease management. And we tried to focus on areas like insulin delivery and other essential but non-COVID related products that we were already making. And as the surge began to swell in late March, it really became apparent that this was going to be a rolling crisis with a series of disruptions and catastrophes that was going to require a constant fluid management of scenario planning, where we were thinking about immediate, short, and long-term solutions as they emerged and popped up. So for us, in specific to COVID-19, we really addressed three critical areas in the fight against the pandemic. We did pivot some existing operations to produce masks, both surgical masks and N95 respirators, but we also ramped up our liquid mix and fill operation to provide solutions that are used as a viral transport for rapid tests done at home or in universities around the country. And we've most recently seen a huge spike in 2D and 3D bags that and other single-use bioprocessing assemblies that are used in drug discovery and production of many of the therapies and vaccines that we're all counting on and reading about today, and that Francie and her team are making at AstraZeneca. So it was initially a let's keep the train on the tracks moment that has since become a balance of trying to rapidly address the needs in the fight against COVID-19 while also meeting the requirements of our existing customers and stakeholders. So we've really been able to do that through investment in scale and capability through key and strategic partnerships.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, thank you so much for your swift response and ability to pivot. I mean, we are so fortunate here in Massachusetts to see a number of companies who were able to respond to that call to action so quickly. Francie, I'd love to hear about this from the pharmaceutical perspective. So tell us how AZ responded at the onset of COVID, both from a vaccine perspective and a therapeutic perspective.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's been quite a year, as you can imagine. At the beginning of 2020, Oxford University had been doing work on another type of vaccine and had a platform that they were able to pivot and use to start to the discovery process of a vaccine to address the COVID pandemic. Our world headquarters is located in Cambridge, England, and we had worked with Oxford in the past and learned of their desire to partner with a large pharmaceutical company that could, handle the research, the development, and then the manufacturing on a worldwide basis of a vaccine. And we entered into a partnership with them soon after that, and almost immediately we began the work. The incredible thing is that the work all had to take place in tandem, where normally you would have certain timelines. In this case, you didn't have the luxury of that amount of time. And so clinical research started, supply chain, obtaining supply chains around the world started, standing up manufacturing sites for vaccine manufacturing that we didn't have in place started. We retrofitted a facility in Westchester, Ohio, that we were using for the manufacture of diabetes medication. We retrofitted that in a very compressed time span. All of this was being at the same time that we were working on our clinical trials. We didn't, at the time, you don't even know if you have a viable vaccine. You're in phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. Those soon became, of course, phase 3 clinical trials, large scale in both England and the United States. But all of that's being done at the same time, and no corners can be cut. So compressed timelines, but not cutting any corners. It was just really incredible to see. All of that resulted in, like you say, it's just hard to believe it's just been a year, and the vaccine is now rolling out in over 50 countries, and just really, really proud of the work that got done.
I mean, again, and just an incredible rapid response. It's amazing what our industry has been able to do in such a short period of time. So unfortunately, even with the highly effective vaccines, we know that COVID isn't going anywhere. Francie, I'm interested in how AstraZeneca is thinking about the future innovation for COVID, both in how to address the variants and the need for effective therapeutics.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I didn't tell you yet about the therapeutic side of things. You asked about it. Really exciting work in that area. We have a monoclonal antibody, AZD7442. It's actually a combination of 2 antibodies that were, initial work was done at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, and we soon entered into a partnership there. That antibody is it's in clinical trials right now. Hope to have readouts on that soon for both prophylactic use and for treatment. The exciting thing is there's some early indication that could be effective against the variants. More to come on that. And then as far as the vaccine goes, I think we're the only pharmaceutical company that's working both on a monoclonal antibody and a vaccine. And there again is some early studies that indicate that the vaccine AZD1222 is effective against some of the variants. More to come on that also. And then research is already being done by Oxford and AstraZeneca on new vaccines to address the variants. As you say, it's not going anywhere, but the work is continuing. It's very exciting to see how fast we reacted and how fast the work is continuing into the next era. Yeah.
Thank you, Francie, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing. It's awe-inspiring, frankly. And to think that a year ago today, we were just entering this very terrifying time where this, beast was at the gates, and to think about 12 months later, we have 3 approved vaccines and more on the way, and established treatments that are saving lives, I think is an incredible testament to the work that companies like yours do. Sort of taking a broader view, though, lots of questions for everybody. We're talking about this 1 year later, not to celebrate, both to celebrate the things that our industry has done, but really to help look ahead at how we sort of come out of this a better society, a better industry. Maybe both of you could take a stab at this question. Steve, I'll put it to you first. Kind of reflecting on where you've been for the past year, what lessons have you learned from the pandemic that you're going to take forward in your business?
I mentioned my employees earlier, and I think that the value of running an agile and mission-driven organization really proved to be very significant in ensuring our business continuity and vitality. By engaging our team in authentic ways, it really allowed us to shift focus and be a first mover in innovation. And in design and manufacturing, when you can make traction early on, it really ensures that you're ready when the time calls. So I think that we'll keep many of the protocols that have worked well for us after COVID-19. I think that a hybrid model of working from home or increased screening during flu season, social distancing. We have an outdoor cafe in the courtyard here at Boyd Technologies, and I think those are here to stay.
Francie, how about yourself?
I'd say the biggest lessons learned are just the need for partnerships. We had an incredible relationship with governments, both in the United States and around the world, and everybody brought something to the table that the other party couldn't bring. That was absolutely necessary in reacting quickly. The partnership with the large patient groups that are addressing the COVID disease around the world. COVAX was stood up in a hurry. A number of vaccine groups came together to ensure that the COVID vaccine would be available to low and middle income countries, and AstraZeneca partnered with them very early. And they're rolling out the vaccine as we speak around the world. Part of our agreement with Oxford was that the vaccine would be manufactured at not-for-profit, and that it would be ensure worldwide distribution, including countries that might otherwise not have access. So the need for partnership with the large patient groups, just partnerships in general, I think was the lesson learned this year.
Yes, absolutely. And these unprecedented partnerships that we're seeing, it's really groundbreaking. So it's very heartening to see, as like what we talked about earlier about collaboration and the response, it really has been the multi sort of industry response in terms of all of us coming together. Here's a tough one. Let's be honest. Are we better prepared today for future pandemics than we were on March 9th of 2020? Steve, do you want to try it?
Yeah. So certainly the technology enabled us to work from home and to embrace telehealth in ways that I think were accelerated and previously not as accepted as they are today. But frankly, Brian, I think the answer to that question is no. I think we're seeing a handful of states, even right now, who are lifting mask mandates and still debating the science. And that debate over public policy and the balance of public health versus the economy is just one example of where I think we're not in a state of readiness, if you will. Supply chain disruptions continue. We hear a lot of people talking about a slow vaccine rollout, but the reality is it's not the capacity of places like AZ that is the limiting factor. Their production capabilities are determined and reliant upon the supply chain for reagents and lipids, vials, syringes, bags. Those raw materials, in some cases, were embargoed for a big part of 2020. And so the limitations on the supply chain are things that I think we need to shift into being much more proactive about as we prepare for the next time.
Steve, Francie, what do you think? Better prepared or not for the next one? Because there will be a next one.
Yeah, and I have a slightly different take. I'd say I agree with Steve completely that there needs to be a focus on the things he was talking about, but I'll take a slightly different take. There were so many lessons learned over the last year, just incredible. And by that, I mean scientific lessons, manufacturing lessons, logistics lessons. And I think all of that will feed into better preparedness next time. As you can imagine, there was a lot of large scale manufacturing that had to take place in a hurry. A lot of lessons learned there, just clinical trial recruitment, how that's done well and in the right way. Working with providers and patients, how that should be done appropriately during a pandemic. And then I think the thing that you hear most about on the news, the most obvious one is the cooperation between state and federal government. A lot of lessons learned there just on logistics and how you roll out vaccine to millions of people. And again, we're not just talking about the United States, but around the world. So I think you can take the lessons learned and say that, heaven forbid, in the next situation where we're having to have a worldwide response to an emergency, that some of those will lead to a better reaction.
So why don't we let's think about a couple other things here in terms of the speed at which our industry responded to COVID and began developing PPE and vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics was incredible. But let's talk about, was there anything that could have been done or communicated better that would have improved our response? I mean, I know the short answer is probably yes. So, but let's maybe we could flesh it out a little bit from your perspectives. Each of you, what do you wish was done better as your companies were responding in the fly to this?
I'm happy to start with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Francie.
Oh, yeah, I think there are a couple of things that could be focused on. Just the large scale manufacturing and the ability to react during a pandemic. There was a lot that needed to be done by different companies all at the same time, and there's no way to maintain large scale manufacturing that isn't being used. So I think that needs to be thought through a little bit, for the future. How do you ramp up large scale manufacturing by multiple companies on a worldwide basis, and when there's not a pandemic, not have idle time? So I think that needs to be focused on. Steve touched on a really good point, the supply chain. Normally you need 6 to 9, maybe even 12 months to stand up supply chains. And obviously during a pandemic, you don't have that type of time. And don't forget, everybody is looking for the same supplies at the same time. I mean, Steve talked about that very well. So that could be focused on. And then just the digital work, all of that, I think a lot of good work was done, but I think that could be focused on also for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think a coordinated national response is an important element of that. We're producing a docuseries called Project Frontline that starts with the state of Massachusetts response to the pandemic that really illustrates the value of the innovation ecosystem and how it's a source of resilience. And so I really think that the alignment of people against a common enemy that was so apparent. Not each other, but a little tiny virus, a little bug. And that created this collaboration and agency between public and private partnerships that I think is a great example of what could, in some instances, was done well, but that could very much be done at a national level, where you have this alliance of government, industry, and academia as a really important element of preparedness.
Yeah.
Well, and Steve, that's something we've always really been priding ourselves on here in Massachusetts, is that ability for all of those government, academia, and industry to work so collaboratively. That's why we think that we are the #1 life sciences cluster in the world. So I want to talk a little bit more about partnerships. And we saw some incredible partnerships come about during COVID. And when we talk about it at the onset of COVID through the Life Sciences Emergency Supply Hub and what we did with MassMEDIC and Mass Hospital Association to work together to get PPE. So, and then we were seeing these really interesting inter-industry partnerships come about. Do you think that that's something we're going to continue to see?
I mean, certainly in the state of Massachusetts, I think that it's something that administrations 10, 20, and even 30 years deep have been doing for a very long time. I had the honor of working with the Baker-Polito administration on their emergency response team. And we actually had our last formal call yesterday and talked a lot about how the governor's command center would get phone calls from other neighboring states and places far away saying, how'd you do it? How'd you align industry and the healthcare community in a way that responded so quickly and appropriately to this? And so I think we're focused on how to bottle that up and share it in ways that it can be done more broadly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the partnerships are going to continue. It was a good exercise in figuring out how the partnerships are working and ways they can improve. There were obviously some new partnerships that had to take place, but I agree 100%. I think going forward, we'll be looking at ways to continue that, hopefully in non-pandemic space. But just incredible work was done. Yeah.
So let's
Kendall, if you'd allow me to just indulge a little bit, I just wanted to continue this. I think Steve, I heard Steve say really adeptly recently that none of what happened in Massachusetts happened overnight in terms of our response to COVID. It was because leaders 25, 30 years ago had the foresight to see that this industry was critical and to make the infrastructure investments, and for organizations like MassBio and MassMEDIC to kind of grow out of that and to support the industry, and that our elected officials understand that we have this regional strength here. I just think if I'm to answer that final question about what could have been done better, it really could have been, we relied way too much on heroism and the individual sort of exceptionalism of our healthcare workers, and we didn't prepare them enough for this battle. And I think we can't think that the next one we're going to have the same exact heroic response because we don't know what the next pandemic's going to be. So we have to continue to invest here in Massachusetts in our ecosystem and our regionality and our strength here in the life sciences. And organizations like MassBio are just so critical to that, and MassMEDIC as well. We're just we have to make sure that we stay in our lanes to make sure that we're pushing everybody to keep the next pandemic on the forefront of people's minds, because people forget.
Absolutely. And to think that 95 companies here in Massachusetts doing COVID related research, it's just so representative of the vibrant, robust early stage innovation cluster that we have here, and really exciting, and something obviously our industry will continue to focus on. But to think that our industry was able to be a beacon of hope in such a dire time, it's remarkable, really.
I think another really important piece, though, is the balance of as we come back to normal. I just read in Stat News today that there's concerns about a lot of non-COVID related medications and shortages associated to that because of the flex. And so I think that balance of being able to pursue innovation. The U.S. Patent and Trade Office mentioned that they now have seen a doubling of patent applications over the course of 2020. So we're about to, I think, in an evolutionary stage, stepping into a tremendous and fertile ground for growth. And I hope we can do it in a really balanced way.
Absolutely. So let's see. Do we have any audience questions? I'm just asking the team. Are there any topics, Steve or Francie, that we didn't cover that you think are important to cover in this sort of year? Look back, but more importantly, focusing on the future?
I think we've covered a lot of it. I mean, when do you think that the AZ vaccine is going to get some traction in the States, Francie?
Yeah, hoping soon. I think very soon is what is all I can say right now. Yeah. Looking forward.
I know that in my personal life, I'm on the chairlift skiing. A lot of people are asking about, which vaccine and which one, should we take? And I guess promoting communication from our industry out to Main Street to highlight that the best vaccine is the first vaccine that you can get, and to really blunt COVID-19, we have to get people to understand that. Yeah,
and that's one of the points that I should have made when we were talking about it earlier. We're talking about the variants. The best fight against the variants is ensuring that really the world gets vaccinated, because the variant, the virus doesn't have a chance to mutate if the vaccine is used efficiently. So to your point, everybody has to work on ensuring that people get the vaccines that are available, and that's done quickly. That addresses that problem before it starts. Yep.
Here we have one audience question here. How should the U.S. consider balancing our need for vaccine supply nationally versus helping the world gain more widespread access to vaccines? And this is a huge question. And I think, Francie, you're probably well positioned with the initial answer.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that were done over the last couple of months was attention to the U.S. response worldwide. And there was a commitment to, I believe it was to COVAX, to help to fund the distribution of the vaccine on a worldwide basis. So I was really happy to see the U.S. come to the forefront on that. And other countries have done the same thing. So COVAX is exciting because it's pharmaceutical companies working together with the organization. It was a large number of the patient groups having to work together in a coordinated effort. UNICEF is helping with the distribution, just incredible amount of cooperation there. And then governments that are fortunate to have a little bit more than other parts of the world have all come to the forefront to help fund that. And the United States has been a big part of that. The companies here and the government are helping to move the vaccine out across the world. It really, obviously it's a challenge that nobody's ever had to deal with before. And it really is heartening to see how fast that's being done and how efficiently. Every day if you're tracking it, COVAX is getting and other organizations too. COVAX was brought together several of the very large organizations, but there are others that are working on it. It's amazing to see how efficient they are in getting the vaccine out to countries that just have not had a place at the table.
It really is impressive that it's happening so quickly. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, I would just add that I think there's this great opportunity to have some economic development and vitality domestically, and still support an international effort. COVAX is at the mercy of some of those same raw materials and supplies that I mentioned earlier. Many of the single-use bioreactor bags that are used around the world come from right here in Massachusetts. And so building up domestic supply chains is going to be something valued around the world and certainly beneficial to the United States at the same time.
All right, well, thank you. So I'll give you any parting words because we're just about at time.
Just thanks for putting this together. It's been great talking about it, and just have really enjoyed working with MassBio on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's really an honor to be part of this community, and thanks for all the work you do advocating and shining a light on this community. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you both so much for participating on this panel and for what your organizations are doing. It truly is remarkable. And Brian, as always, thank you so much to MassMEDIC. We value our partnership. We love collaborating with you, and they're great. We have great results when we work together. So we're going to do more of it. So that's all we have time for. And, thanks everyone for tuning in, and be sure to check out massbio.org for all of our upcoming events. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Kendall. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.